Hi, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to create an image repository type application for Android and iOS using Ionic Framework and Firebase as the cloud storage solution. So to further elaborate on what we're going to do here is, if you're familiar with services like Imager or Instagram or Google Picasa, we're basically just going to make an app that will allow us to take pictures with our device. And every time we take a picture, that picture will be stored to Firebase, and the collection of images can be automatically synchronized between all of our devices and platforms. So with that said, there are a few prerequisites that we'll need in order to complete this task. We're going to go ahead and we're going to need to download the Angular library, which is the Angularjs extension for Firebase. So we'll go ahead and download that. Hit save. We'll also need the official Firebase JavaScript library, so we can go ahead and download that as well. And then we'll actually need the ngCordova Angularjs extension set for Ionic Framework, so we can download that as well. So the reason for the Angularjs extension ngCordova is because when we're going to be working with the Apache Cordova camera plugin, which is not necessarily the easiest to use. So the ngCordova will make it a whole lot easier. So with those libraries downloaded, I'm also going to assume that you have a Firebase account. We're going to brush up on that shortly. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and start by creating a brand new app on our desktop. So let's go ahead and say Ionic start image app blank. We'll let that build. Alright, so let's navigate into our new project. And we're going to go ahead and add the Android platform. So we're going to say Ionic platform add Android. And if you're using the Mac, you can definitely add for the iOS platform as well, but you have to be using a Mac to do that. For simplicity purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to stay strictly Android because it can reach a wider amount of people, but this tutorial will work for iOS as well. Let's go ahead and clear that. The next thing we want to do is we want to add the official Apache Cordova plugin. So we can go ahead and say Cordova plugin add, and then we can say org.apache.cordova.camera, and that will install the camera plugin for our project. So using our text editor, let's go ahead and open up our project that we've created. I created mine on my desktop, so we're going to open it. And then we're going to take the libraries that we installed and we're going to drag them into our project. So let's go ahead and open up our project directory. We're going to go www.js, and then we're going to go ahead and drop the 2 in there for Firebase. And then we have to extract ngCordova, and we are going to copy over the minified file from that download. Alright, so with that said, let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and open up our index.html page inside of the www folder, because at this point in time we need to add all of the libraries that we downloaded. So first up, let's go ahead and add ngCordova. ngCordova is very important as far as where you place this include script. It must go above the cordova.js file. So script, alright, so after that, the 2 Firebase ones can go below. I think it's Firebase JS. And then we've got script source equals JS Angular fire.min.js. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to fix all the brackets on this project because it's currently formatted in a way that's going to drive me crazy. You can go ahead and leave it however you want. This isn't going to change the functionality of our application. I'm going to go ahead and delete these comments too. Alright, now the indentations look a little better for us. So now that we've included all of our libraries into the index.html, we now need to open up the JavaScript file app.js, and we need to include them in our Angular module directive. So we can do the following. We're going to go ahead and add ngCordova, and we're also going to add Firebase. Alright, moving on. The next thing we want to do is, let's go ahead and clean this up a bit again. So I'm going to delete the comments because I want to make sure that it's usable. So we're going to call this app image app, and that's going to be the name of our controllers as well. Alright, so we're a little better on the cleanup side here. So let's go ahead and add preparation for Firebase here. So what we want to do is we want to say, this is going to be global too, by the way. So it's going to be var fb for Firebase equals new Firebase. And inside there we're going to pass in the URL to our application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass in my Firebase URL, but please do not use mine. Use your own because it's not free. For large-scale accounts, and I prefer not to be charged a lot of money. So let's go ahead and copy that, and we're going to go ahead and paste it in and add a semicolon onto it. So we're getting pretty far here. The next thing that we want to do is we want to start adding the Angularjs UI router, which is going to be our method for navigating between views in our application. And when I say views, we're going to have two different screens in our application. We're going to have a login/register screen, and we're going to have a screen for secure area for after we've logged in. So what we need to do is we first need to configure the UI router, and we can do that by doing image app.config, and we're going to pass in a function, state provider, state router provider. And now we can start defining our states. Our first state is going to be called Firebase, and it's going to handle all of our Firebase type stuff. So we're going to say URL Firebase template URL, which we're going to create shortly. It's going to be in the templates directory, and it's going to be called Firebase.html. The controller is going to be Firebase controller. And we're not going to cache this controller here. So we're going to say false. Alright, so the second state that we're going to have is going to be our secure state. Alright, so all of our states are done. So we need to default it for when we enter our application. We're going to default it to Firebase every time. So if you wanted to get fancy with your app, you can do some logic to automatically put you into the secure page. But for simplicity, every time we open up the app, we're going to force the user to log in. And that's just for demo purposes. So So now that we've got our config set up, let's go ahead and prep for our views. The first thing we want to do is we want to go into the index.html file and we want to remove some of this stuff to make it more compatible. So let's go ahead and scrap everything that's inside of the ion pane tags. And we're going to swap it out with the following. Ion navbar, class, bar stable, and then we're going to say ion nav view, and this is what it does. It lets us use the UI router that we just set up. So at the current moment in time, we're done with the index.html. So what we want to do is inside of our www directory is we want to create another folder. We're going to call that templates. And inside the templates directory, we want to create two files. We want to create the firebase.html, and we want to create secure.html. So let's go ahead and start populating these views here. So let's start with Firebase, since it's going to be the first screen that we're going to see. I'm going to say ion view, title equals Firebase. The next thing we're going to say is ion content. Then we're going to say div. And now div, we're going to create a list here. Div class list, list inset. And now we're going to create list items, which are going to be our form elements. I'm going to say input ng model equals username, and when in terms of Firebase, username is going to be email. Type equals text, and placeholder equals username. Alright, now let's go ahead, we can go ahead and copy this. We're going to create another field. This one's going to be password. Alright, now we've got our two fields. Now we can go ahead and create our button bar. And that's going to contain a login and a register button. So we're going to say div class equals padding left, padding right. Now, remember, all of our views are going to be pretty simplistic looking. They're not going to be anything desirable to submit to the App Store. You should do all of your CSS styling beyond what I'm doing. Button bar. I'm going to say a class button, ng click. It's going to be login, username, password. Let's go ahead to save us a little bit of typing here. We're going to go ahead and copy that. And this time we're going to say register. Alright, so we're done with the Firebase view. So let's go ahead and copy that. We're going to recycle some of this code in our secure.html. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to scrap everything inside of the content. So this is where things can get a little nutty here. First, let's rename this. So our goal here for this screen is we're going to have a button that we're going to create that's going to be responsible for taking our picture. So let's start there. Ion nav buttons side equals right. And we're going to create one button. We're going to give it a camera icon. We're going to get a function of upload, which we're going to create soon. Alright, so this view is going to have our one button, and the rest of it is going to be a grid. So our grid is going to be 4 columns and X number of rows. So we're going to have a maximum of 4 columns per row, and that's going to loop for infinitely. So I did make another tutorial on this. If you want to know the further details on why we've chosen this route, you can view that on my blog as well. So in the meantime, I'm just going to go ahead and type it out and explain it as I go here. So we're going to go ahead and create a div class, row. We're going to repeat image in images. And then this is where things get a little crazy here. We're going to say ng if. So we're only going to create a new row if the index is modulus of 4, and that is going to be equal to 0. So that means that we've done our 4th row, or our 4th column, and we're going to move on to another row. So in here, we're going to start creating our columns. We're going to make sure that our index exists before we create the column to avoid any null exceptions. And now we're going to say image ng source, because we're going to be using brackets. And we're going to say data :image / JPEG base 64 comma. So as you can see here, we're going to be using base 64 images because that's the type of format that Firebase accepts. So we're going to get a little further into that soon. So right now, just go with it, and we'll explain that shortly. So it's going to be a base 64 image, and then we're going to pass in the image data. So images, then we're going to do the index.image. And then we're going to say width equals 100%. So we're going to copy this 3 more times, and we're going to add 1 to each of the index. Because remember, we're defining that we only want 4 columns per row. And you'll see how neat this looks soon. Alright, so we're now done with our secure area screen. So what we want to do now is let's start worrying about Firebase before we start touching our controllers. So going into your Firebase dashboard, the first thing that you want to do is you want to go to the security and rules screen. Now I'm going to go ahead and copy what I have in mind into the text editor because the font is a little larger. So what we're saying here is we want to be able to write to all users, but we only want the logged in authorized user to be able to read their own data. So we don't want other users to be able to read other users' data. And this is just a simple use case. You can get more creative if you want. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. The next thing that you want to do in the Firebase dashboard is you want to go to login and auth, and you want to confirm that email and password authentication is enabled because that's what we're going to be using. I know that there are other options such as Facebook and Twitter, but for this tutorial we're only using email and password authentication. Alright, so moving on. The next thing that we're going to visit upon is we want to know how our data is going to be structured in Firebase. So it's going to look something like this, where we have an images node, and that images node is going to be an object, and that object is going to have unique image IDs. Now these IDs are created by Firebase every time we add a new image. So that's going to be an object, and inside that object there's going to be an image. And that image is going to be base 64 data uploaded from our application. And that's going to loop however many times we choose. So with that said, let's go ahead and close that. We don't need it. I was just showing you the structure. So the first thing that we want to do is let's go ahead and navigate to app.js. We're going to add our first controller here. It's going to be Firebase controller. So we're going to say image app.config. Oops, not config, I'm sorry, controller. I'm going to say scope state Firebase off. All right. So we're going to say var Firebase off equals Firebase off. We're going to pass in the FB variable for Firebase. And now we're going to have two methods. We're going to have a login method and a register method. And if you've been keeping up with my other tutorials and you've seen that I've done other Firebase tutorials, you'll know that I'm using the same logic that I used in all of my tutorials so far. So we're going to say scope.login function username password. We're going to say Firebase off with password. And we're going to map email to username and password to password. So with that said, we're going to enter our callback or our promise. We're going to say function off data. And because it was successful, this is the success promise, we're going to say state.go, and then we're going to enter the secure area. Otherwise, we're going to catch an error, and we're just going to present it in the console. Alright, that was pretty easy. We just did the login. Now the register is going to look pretty similar. We're going to say scope register equals function username password. And in this scenario, what's going to happen is we're going to register the user and then immediately sign them in. So we're going to say Firebase off create user. Email is going to get mapped to username, and password is going to get mapped to password. Then so in this case, we're going to return the login. So it's going to be kind of like a chained event here. Alright, so then we can enter the callback of this event. And it was successful, so we're going to say state.go secure again. Otherwise, we're going to catch an error. Alright, so now we're officially done with our Firebase controller. The next thing that we want to do is we want to start working on our secure controller. So let's drop down. And we're going to pass in the scope. We're going to do Ionic history, Firebase array, and Cordova camera. Alright, so the first thing we want to do is we want to say Ionic history dot clear history. And we do this because after we've logged in, we don't want someone on an Android device to hit the background and end up back at the login screen. We just want to exit the app. So no logging in after you've already signed in. So it'll clear the history stack. The next thing we want to do is we want to say scope.images equals empty array. So in case there are no images saved to Firebase, we don't want any undefined errors when we try to repeat through them. So now we've defined it as an empty array. Now we're going to check to make sure that we're logged in before we start trying to use these features. So Firebase off equals Firebase.getOff. So we're going to say if Firebase off is true. So if it's not true, what we're going to do is we're going to navigate back into the Firebase controller. well, not the Firebase controller, more like the Firebase route. And then if we are successful, we're going to capture the user reference in the data structure, Firebase.child. We're going to enter the users node, and then we're going to get the Firebase auth.user ID. So we're going to navigate right into the specific user node. Put a semicolon on that. Now we're going to call our sync array. And what we're doing here is we are binding a specific node in Firebase to an array object in Angularjs or JavaScript. So Firebase array user reference dot child images, and close that off. I'm going to say scope dot images equals sync array. So it'll populate this images array with whatever we find on Firebase. So our final function of this controller is going to be our upload for taking pictures and uploading them to Firebase. So we're going to say scope.upload equals function. We're going to create our camera object, give it all kinds of properties. All of this can be found in the Apache Cordova documentation. I've also made another post on it on my blog, which you can get more information if you choose. I'm going to say our image quality is 75. Destination type going to be camera.destination type .data URL. That's probably the most important parameter here. Data URL means that it's going to return base 64 data, and that's going to be what we're going to use for Firebase. I'm going to say source type is camera.picture source type .camera. Allow edit true. Encoding type is going to be camera.encoding type .jpeg. I'm going to say popover options. We're going to go ahead and give it a target width. You can choose to give it whatever you want. I'm going to say 500 pixels by 500 pixels. And then finally, save to photo album false. So we've just made our options object. Let's go ahead and make that plural because it is options. The next thing that we want to do is we want to call the getPicture function of ngCordova. So I'm going to say Cordova camera dot getPicture. We're going to pass in the options, and we're going to worry about our promises now. So this is our success promise, and now this is our error promise, or our reject. So we're going to say console.log, console.error. Alright, so inside the success, what we want to do is get into our Firebase here, Firebase sync array dot add. So we're going to add it to the structure. And we're going to go ahead and add an object, so image data, then so after it gets added to Firebase, we're just going to show an alert. Alright. So now with a little bit of luck, we're at a point where we can test this. So it's very important here, you do not test this in a web browser. We are using native device plugins, the camera, which although It's slowly being added into web browser capable. It is not very good. So I wouldn't even waste your time testing this in a web browser. Only use a device or simulator. And it's important to note that currently the iOS simulator does not work with cameras. So you would have to use an iOS device or some kind of Android. So let's go ahead and do Ionic build Android. It always takes a while the first time. Alright, so it built successful, so now we're going to install it. ADB install R. Alright, so I'm using Genymotion. So what I want to do now is I want to activate the camera, and hopefully it works. We're just going to take a picture of me here at my desk. Alright, so you can see me. So let's go ahead and open up the app. And it looks like there could be issues. So I'm going to close me out of here for a second. You don't need to stare at me. So let's do ABB logcat and see where we might have gone wrong. Now I don't necessarily see an error here. Oh wait, uncaught error. Failed to instantiate model state router provider. So I think maybe I made an error. Yeah, this should be URL router provider. So let's go ahead and recompile this. Install it. We're going to open up our app here. Looks better. So I've already created an account based on my other tutorials, so I'm going to go ahead and use it. It's nick@testing.com, and the password is 1234. So I'm going to choose to log in. So it took me to the secure area, just as it should. What we're going to do now is we are going to enable my camera again. And we're going to say, click on this picture icon here. You know what, I had this problem the other day. I think I need to update my Genymotion. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and close this off. No, hold on. Maybe I need to rotate the camera. No. So something weird's going on. Let's see what happens when I choose dummy webcam. No. Something's going on. So what I just did was I updated my Genymotion simulator because I knew I had some updates, and now the camera seems to be working appropriately. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the camera back on. We can see me in the preview. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this icon, and you can see me on the device now. I need to adjust the orientation, but it really doesn't matter. Let's go ahead and take a picture, and we are going to save it. The image was saved. You can see I show up in that grid now. Let's go back into Firefox here and look at our data. We can see that images was now saved. We have one base64 image. So let's go ahead and take a few more pictures here to play around with things. Again, another one was saved. Let's take a few more. I just want to show you how it looks when it wraps. I don't know, this is supposed to be a fist pump. Doesn't really look like one. You see how it dropped down? It creates like a, I don't know, it's kind of responsive. And you can see that they're all being added to Firebase. And if you were to log in to the same account on a different device, all of your images would automatically instantly synchronize to that new device. So just to reiterate here, what we did was we created a new Ionic Framework app. We integrated Firebase as our cloud data store. We added ngCordova for our camera. And then we stored our camera data in base64 format on Firebase. So that's pretty cool. I mean, if you wanted to take this further, you could probably easily create your own Instagram type app, or even maybe you just wanted a safe storage for your own personal photos as you go, rather than using, say, Instagram or any of those.